Thank you for coming tonight, and again, I apologize if I have you cough in the middle of this, but it is what it is, right? Let me pray, we'll start. Heavenly Father, thank you, Lord, for who you are and for all that you've done. Thank you for the way that you have been at work here in our church family, in our community. Thank you for what you're doing around the world. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to partner with others as you are using them in different places. And thank you, Lord, for the privilege of just knowing you. I pray for this meeting tonight. I ask that your Holy Spirit would guide and direct us, and may I be able to share the information clearly in a way that helps us to know and pray better and to follow your leading very clearly and closely. So we commit our time to you tonight, and I pray this in Jesus' strong name. Amen. Well, I did make a video, kind of an optimistic video, where I thought at the time that tonight's meeting would have drawings and costings and all of that. But as we met initially with David McKnight, who is the primary architect, he wanted to meet with us to kind of share information and then iterate it one more time before he actually did the drawings and the renderings. And part of the reason for that was he wanted to share with the Long Range Planning Committee some things that impact the whole project. So you know, when you start a meeting like that, it's probably not going to be good news, right? So let me just explain it. It revolves around just a couple things. One of them is building codes, which you understand building codes change all the time. And we also understand that building materials go up. So that's a no-brainer. We already know that. But one of the issues that we have in terms of building codes and fire codes is that when you have a structure that's made of wood, it changes all of the ways that you have to get people out of the building in case of a fire. Now, the building that we're in right now is a steel structure. And the building in the very, very back is a steel structure. But the building in the middle is a wood structure. So what that has meant is every time that we have added on, there are firewalls that have to go up around that wooden structure. And in essence, that's okay, except that the fire code says you can't pass through a firewall to get to the outside. You have to be able to just get to the outside without cutting through a firewall. And part of the reason for that is in the cafe space out there between the wooden building and this building, there's an opening, but there's actually a door that comes down. So if the fire alarm system goes off, that door will come down. So if your fire exit is through that door, not good. You have to have other ways to get out of the building. What that means is, as the architect is thinking about how to solve the problems that we've asked them to solve and consider what we need to do for a new auditorium, that means that the exits to that building and the way that building is connected to this building have to marry in a way that provides for all of those fire codes and all those building codes. And when you touch an existing building in any kind of remodeling way, you have to bring the codes up to whatever the current standard is. So all that to say, as he was drawing it, that made some significant limitations to how he could position buildings and how things had to be oriented so that you get people in and out. And one of the things that he was operating under was the assumption that we were still going to have children in that wooden structure. I'm sorry, how to mute some of the people that are watching on Zoom. You're hearing that conversation a little bit. But, and so his understanding was we've got children in that space now. And with children in that space, there's additional exit fire code kind of things. But we were able to tell him, no, what we think we're going to do is repurpose the wooden structure to be adult rooms. And then that would let us open up the whole hallway, because you can't, like right now, you have the protection, the wall that people can't get through, because when the children are registered, they're behind that protective wall and the doors are shut. If we have adults in there, we can take that whole door out and you can have access out that side of the building. So if you're in that wooden structure, you don't have to go in this direction, which is a big problem. You could actually go out in that direction. So when we told him that we would be willing to remodel that structure, he could then make some changes and shift some things around. So that's why we don't even have any drawings to show you tonight, because there's some major shifting around that he's going to do there. One of the other things that the codes have impacted us, and we've known this because we walked right up to the very edge of the line when we built the last building in the back. Actually, when we built the bathrooms in the back here a couple of years ago. And that is that when you have any impervious material, which includes a roof or asphalt, you have to have a plan to take water away. Because when water comes down, if you have a high rain event, that has to be taken care of in a way that doesn't wash out your neighbors. I think we all understand that a little bit better after Helene and Milton, right? So we knew that we were at the absolute limit for impervious material between our roof and our parking lot. In order for us to then do any more, we're going to have a plan to change the site in order to eliminate the water that's going to run off our parking lots and run off of our roofs. And what that means, as if you've seen any kind of construction recently, it means you have to have detention ponds or retention ponds. And then you have to have a lot of plumbing back and forth to get into the city sewer system and all of that sort of thing. And so all of that means that before we can even begin to do a single building, we have to then do all kinds of site work to bring it up to the point where we can begin to even top that number. So all of those things kind of pile up, and so he just said, you need to know that's coming. I don't want you to be surprised by it, and we needed to share that with you. So all of that is significant information. We sharpened our pencils, went back and forth a little bit with the architect, and we're able, I think, to help manage and give him good understanding about how he could adjust some of the designs that he'd been working on. One of the other things, however, that we knew that we would have to face is that our mission home is exactly in the wrong location. And so, as we talked about that, how do you maneuver the buildings around, and how do you maneuver the parking around, and how do you do this around, so ultimately what we came to learn as the long-range planning committee is that the mission home, which is a huge priority for us, and it's a non-negotiable in our minds, but we're going to have a different plan for the mission home than for that mission home to be right there. And so I'm telling you that because we feel it's important to have a mission home and to be thinking about what we're going to do with that before anything else. So we spent a fair amount of time in our meeting after the architect left. How are we going to talk about these things? What are we going to do? Do we build a building on site, a new mission home on site? Do we try to buy something in the neighborhood? What are the options? Can we move it? All of the things that we talked through. And ultimately, what we've decided is there's a whole lot of information we don't know, and we can't present what we don't know. But we want to present what we do know, and that is that we will probably have a plan to do something different with the mission home. And in order to do something different with the mission home, after we get our research done and figure a few things out, the long-range planning committee is going to come back to you probably a month or so from now with a number, and they're going to say, we would like permission to spend up to this amount to get a new mission home and take care of that out of our surplus money. And the reason that I think it has to go in that direction is because the way that the housing market is set, we could not find a home and then call a business meeting, which we have to have 2 weeks before we can call a business meeting, and present the specific home, because it'll be gone. Or we'll be in a bidding war. And then, it won't work. So I think the best way as we talk through it would be to just do the research, find out what's out there, what our options are, and then say, here's a number, would you give us permission to just go find that and to use those in our church that are gifted to do that sort of thing, and then have the ability to spend up to that amount and just get that job done. All right, so that's ultimately, that's kind of the landscape. And one of my favorite lines from the movie, Napoleon Dynamite, which is probably not, a recommended movie for its stupidity levels, but my favorite quote from that movie is, "Nothing ever works smooth around here." And if you've watched the movie, you know the scene, and I won't describe the scene. But anyway, nothing ever works smooth. So to hear the architect say, these things are the reality, this is the reality, okay, we knew there'd be some bumps in the road. But those were things that we felt like, oh, okay, that's significant enough that we wanted to share that with you. So here's what's happening. The architect has gone back to the drawing board, not going to throw out everything that he's worked on and that his team has worked on, but be able to make some of the adjustments that we as a committee said, we think you should make these, and then he'll come back. And when he comes back, which is supposed to happen first or second week of November, I think, he will have drawings and renderings and the cost. And at that point, we'll be able to share that data with you. So here's the plan. We have a business meeting the second Sunday of every November where we present the proposed budget for the next year. And we will do that on November the 10th in the evening. That's usually a pretty good sized business meeting because we go through what we think we need the money for and how we're going to spend it and what the reasoning is behind it. We give you opportunity to interact with that. And that's an important thing. It's also the time when the nominating committee presents names for the committee members. And so there's a lot that we're going to cover that night. It doesn't make sense for us to have a marathon session all in one night. So we're going to have that business meeting on the 10th, and we're tentatively planning for another business meeting like this on the 17th, the following week, because you can't postpone it one more week or you're gone for Thanksgiving. So we're going to try to squeeze it in there so that you have time to see things, because ultimately, when we see what on paper it would look like, we need to have time to pray. It's the same thing with our budget. We present a proposed budget in November, we pray about it for a month, let you interact with it. If there's adjustments that need to be made, we make them in December. We come back in December, approve that budget. That guides us for the next year. But we always need time to pray. And with whatever project that we're doing, whatever ministry that we're endeavoring to set out to do, we need to really give that a lot of prayer. And so the plan is to do that in a way that gives you all the information that you could have to digest and to pray about it. There's a lot that is going to go into this process. Once we get things back, we're going to need to say, okay, is this something the Lord would be leading us to? And how do we make that decision? We're going to have to probably do some, in addition to praying, do some other things to get the word out and to try to get a grasp of legitimately what the Lord would enable us to give in order to make something like that happen. So we don't want to cross those bridges before we get to them. We don't want to make any assumptions, but we do want to keep you in the loop for everything that we know. And that's what we know as of right now. So Nat, you have your hand up, and I think Greg has a microphone. And if you would just wait till he trots back to you. I know you have a good booming voice, but we want everybody to do that.
Thanks. Hey, I apologize because I probably missed this business meeting. Can you give like a 2-minute summary of what we told the architects, requirements and goals for that project?
No, that's a really good question, Nat. So part of what the architect wanted to do was he wanted to lay out everything so that we could see what everything would require. So here's kind of what we had envisioned. We told the architect that in all of the scenarios that we work through, if the Lord wants us to build, and so maybe I should back up. Why do we think the Lord wants us to build? And the answer to that is, well, our community is changing. There's thousands of houses that are being built around us, and we need to just consider that. Does the Lord want us to reach out there? So if the Lord does, how does that impact us? Well, I think we have kind of a feel for where we are in terms of attendance-wise here. And we know that if we grow too much more, it's going to be hard to fit people in, so we have to make space for them. So if that's true, and that's true, and that's true, a building project would probably be the thing to do. There's some other options that we also, in the long-range planning committee, consider doing, but that's the most viable one. So when we tasked the architect to do this feasibility study, we said, look, it doesn't make sense for us to build a sanctuary that's marginally bigger than us. Let's build a sanctuary that we could have a single service, at least for a while. And then we could have our life groups meet before that single service and after that single service. We could all be together, we could double use our life group space, and we could be together. But then that would also make it possible for us that if we filled up that one sanctuary in that one service, we could go back to 2 services. But now we have twice as much space. So we asked the architect to design a space that could get to as big as 1,000 people. And to maybe build some classrooms in it, but we can take the walls out, blah, 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 blah. So that's what he did. He put that in there. Then we talked to him about Sunday school space and about children's space and remodeling some of our areas and retooling some of the things that we would do and moving the teens into here and so on. And so he took all of that and he tried to put all that together. So he did design a building that would seat 1,000, that would have space for our musicians to practice and to worship, or to work and to do what they need to do. There would be a big enough platform that you could do a variety of worship arts, not just small groups, but you could do more drama productions and more other things. So he designed a really nice structure that that when he did show us kind of a floor plan of what he put together, but I mean, it's got this massive firewall, and this building doesn't connect to this building because you can't connect the two because the people got to get out of this building and get to the outdoors, and it wasn't going to work in terms of flow of traffic. And he knew that, but he just kind of laid it all out. So these are the things that you're asking for, and kind of retooled some of this area as well. And he said, I just want you to see what all of that looks like, and then these are the problems that you're going to have with that. So that's kind of the nutshell of what we asked him to do. Show us what the possibility of doubling in size here, and then making the adjustments that we need to make in the other space, or adding space there as well to accomplish those kinds of things. So yeah, he came back and said it's a great idea, but that wooden structure in the middle, that's creating some headaches for you. So, and your site development, your site work is also a pretty big deal. Okay, other questions that you might have? Yes, Robert. Craig is coming.
I was going to do Anthony first.
Oh, Anthony, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. I'm sorry.
Robert first. What would be, if we went to 1,000 people, where would we be meeting during construction, and what kind of timeline are we talking about? Any idea?
Yeah, so we asked him that question, and it's basically a 2 years worth of construction. Now the good news is that it wouldn't impact this space immediately. So we could continue working and worshiping here while construction would take place. There would be some impact on where the building meets the building and all of that sort of thing, but that could be worked around even in a construction phase. But the construction phase, by the time you do the site work, and by the time you get all the permits pulled, and by the time you do all of that stuff, he said it would be something like around 2 years. So we have to have a plan, because those houses are coming into place right now. And so it's not like we can say, oh, we got all this time. Because if people are coming and we don't really have room for them, they'll find another church to go to. And then if we build later on, it's like, well, no, we've already got it. We're good to go. You know, you're fine. So you almost have to be prepared for when they start to come. So even if we look at a 2-year time frame to construct something, we have to have a plan in place. How are we going to still reach out to these new people so that they do have space here to begin worshiping with us? We're working on that too. So that's kind of a parallel track. And I'll actually talk about that next month when we have our building or our budget preview, because there's some things that are going to be built into the budget that we're proposing to answer some of those questions. If we're talking about a horizon, a time horizon that's at least 2 years away, if not more, then how do we get from here to there without just stalling out? We don't want to do that. So we're trying to think through all of those things. Did that answer your question? Okay, Anthony.
Yes. It was a couple of minutes late, so you may have stated this, but was the max build out that you were talking about that you gave with the doubling the size? Is that with a completely new facility and this facility goes away?
No, no. So it would be a new facility in terms of another building on our property, but it would be married to this facility, and we would repurpose. So for example, if we built a new sanctuary that would seat more people, then we would move crew into here, into this space, and then we could repurpose the entire 10,000 square feet back there into children's ministry, make it really secure, and do some other things, and maybe even add additional classroom space, like along that wall here, along that wall there. So there's a marrying of this current structure, not to completely throw everything out. And honestly, that was the other thing that we asked the architect to do, is we gave the architect a couple other ideas of stuff that we thought, okay, let's think out of the box in terms of future ministry. What might we do? What could be possible future ways to reach out to the community? And where would you put those things on our property? Because if you're going to build a building in one spot, you're going to then handcuff yourself to a certain extent in order to do anything else with your property. So that master site planning is part of what the architect is trying to help us work through as well. And when we do get drawings, we'll speak to some of those issues. But yeah, it would be all married. It would be to try to use our space currently in as efficient and economical way as possible, because new building, if you're going to build something brand new, the costs are pretty significant. Remodeling what we have is a much better option. And we have the land, so that's a really great blessing that the Lord's given us. Did that answer your question?
Partially. So this new structure would be standalone. I mean, it would be independent of this, but it would somehow be linked to this structure. That was the idea.
Right. So we want it to be as connected as possible. So let me just kind of give you an anecdotal story. We had our Greater Dayton Association annual meeting last week at a church in Miamisburg. And this church was built, I'm going to guess it was built in the late 50s, maybe early 60s, and added on to significantly over time. They added a gym, added a wing, added classrooms, and so on. But when you came in their main entrance, you had to walk all the way around, all the way around. I mean, there was like, Tim's up here shaking his head. You had to, and a number of other folks, I think Bill was there, you had to do a big walkthrough to get to the building. And then when you get into the sanctuary, you walk into that door right there, basically. So and because it's not as wide as this, it's maybe half as wide as this room. So just imagine, it goes back a little further, but it's about half as wide as this room. And you got a room full of people, and that door right there, actually, it's a little bit farther. Everybody starts walking through there. So it doesn't make sense to be late to church. It really doesn't make sense to be late to church. And so the whole purpose of me telling you that story is when we were in there, we were like, oh, this is the reason why you plan where you're going to put buildings and how those buildings connect and how the traffic flows and how people stop and talk to each other and where all of those pieces fit as you lay the structure out. And that's I think, one of the strengths of McKnight. He did get that. So as he kind of shared some of his initial thoughts with us that we looked at it, it's like, yeah, you got it. Yeah, but how about this? How about if we do this? How about if we do that? We can accomplish many of the same things and maybe save some money. And so that's why he went back to the drawing board, because he feels like he came away from that meeting with some really good direction that would help him to help us better.
Okay. Just one small question.
Yeah.
Do we have a sense of a kind of going in budget?
So what we told the architect was we thought $5.5 million would be our budget. Now, what we're talking about, that would be a very comfortable thing. And so part of the reason that we gave him that number, let me just explain kind of the thought process that went behind it. In our current budget right now, we budget to pay ourselves a pseudo mortgage payment of $10,000 a month. Now, I don't know what the mortgage rates are, so I don't know all that. But we did that because we felt like if we do want to do some kind of a future project, let's not build something and then like, oh, now what are we going to do? Let's get ourselves in a position where we're already paying for that sort of thing. So if we're already paying about $120,000 a year, I did kind of on an envelope, if you took out a 20-year mortgage with a 10-year balloon payment, you got a 5.5% interest, how much money could you borrow and not have to put a single more dime in our budget, okay? And then with that number, it's like, okay, if we say as a church that we're going to get behind this and we're going to give toward it, because obviously it's not just one thing to say, yeah, let's build. We can't do that. We have to say, yeah, we'll build and we'll give to help that happen. And those have to be absolutely intertwined. And so how do you project what God is going to enable us to give? That's the unknown button. So we just kind of worked through that process. Okay, if we don't want to get ourselves strapped financially too much with a burden of a debt, and yet we don't want to presume that God is going to drop a huge bucket of money on us, how much do we think our church family would step up to the plate and move? Part of the way that we answered that question was to look historically at some data. And so, for example, when the tornado struck this church in the year 2000, the church body was a much smaller body. I'm looking over here at Charles and Etta. I'm looking at Bill back there, and David and Kathy here, and maybe there's some others, Wakefield. When that happened, the church body was much smaller. And the task in front of them was to totally rebuild everything. They built the structure that we're in right now, up to where that firewall is at the end of the cafe. So this was the initial building that they built. They did not have enough insurance to cover the cost of what all of this required. And so in faith, they stepped out to build this building. And in the year 2003, when the doors opened, they incurred a debt. That debt per capita, if my memory serves, per capita, that debt was somewhere just south of $3,000 a person. Now, to put that in context, that was $2,002. So I don't know what the inflation rate would make that today. Nate, you got your calculator out. If it's $3,000 in 2003, it's probably $4,200. Let's see how close that was. $4,200 in our day and age, right? No, he's not really looking at it. Okay, so anyway, that was the level of burden that the folks here stepped up to. When we built the most recent structure in the back, that 10,000 square feet in 2012, what we agreed to do per capita was about $1,500. It's about half of what that initial group stretched their necks to do. Now, we really want to be conservative, but when that initial group built this, they built a sanctuary that could hold, we can get 440 chairs in here. That's the maximum capacity in our chairs. They built a sanctuary that would hold 440 people when they were probably running 130. Would that be pretty accurate?
Yes.
130. So they built a structure and asked the Lord, stretched, and asked the Lord to fill it. And so in a sense, historically, what that says, by the way, did you calculate it?
5250.
52, so I was way below. So we're not saying that we're going to put a burden on everybody's back to the tune of $5,200, but that would be the apples to apples comparison with what that original group did back then. So when we think through those things and we think about, okay, what did we do when we built the 10,000 square foot addition back there, and what did we do back in 2002 when they that were here worked on this? What's that conservative estimate? That's why we came back to the architect and said we thought we could do $5.5 million. Now that's an estimate that frankly says we're pretty confident we can handle it. which may not be the best way to approach doing the Lord's work. We'll do it as long as we can handle it. I want to be very careful here because I am not jumping off the cliff to say, let's just go for the goal. You know, let's just do the biggest thing and not worry about it. That's not me. You know me well enough to know that is not me. I much prefer to be in the categories like, okay, Lord, this is good. I'm comfortable. I'm not as happy when it requires much more trusting that the Lord is going to lead us clearly. And I really want him to lead us clearly. So we will get all the information out to you, what the building would cost, what the building looks like, all of those things, because we need to know, is this what the Lord wants us to do? So yeah. Kathy, hang on, microphone's coming.
I gotta dig it up now.
He's got his track shoes on.
Okay, switch from the money to the people.
Hold it up close.
Okay, since we work back in the children's department, we are busting out of our seams back there. We average 30 kids, me and David, okay? And the other classes are getting big. So in this plan, are we going to have more children's rooms? Because if you're going to get more people in the sanctuary, you're going to have more kids back there.
Yes, exactly. So when we talk to the architect, all of that is part of it. We need additional classrooms for our adult life groups. We need space for our teens. We need space for our children. And some of that might have to be phased a little bit more. There might be additional children's space we'll have to build in the future. But what we're thinking in terms of what the architect has in his mind right now enables the children to expand, enables the youth to expand, and enables the adults to have a little more space as well. So will we still feel a little tight? Will we still have to be wise with how we use our real estate? Yeah, absolutely. But you can't, it would be absolutely, I think, absolutely impossible for us to say, let's do it all at once. let's just, do everything for children and for teens and for adults and for this and that, to do it all at once when we're building for the future. And just like with this building, it had capacity to grow, and then ultimately we had to do other buildings in that. Those were phased in later. And so this represents what I think is a huge step forward, because it will allow us to really grow in a lot of different ways. But there might come a day when we say, we really need some specific space for children's ministry, specific space for this. And part of the site development, part of the things that we're thinking in terms of, okay, what other ministries might the Lord open up to us that we'll present when we're showing you the drawings? Those are designed as kind of like the way to get children's ministry to yet another level.
Yeah,
So-
because me and David's been involved in this church for 45 years. So in the old church before the tornado, I guess I would like to see, just my input, what we had that we haven't had since we even started building this. In the old church, we had a class for each grade. First, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. Yes, we had 2 stories, and the top story was the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Ever since we built here, we've always had it combined.
Sure.
Me and David's had 3 to 6 graders, 3rd to 6th graders, or first and second together. I don't know, I guess in the future, I would like the committee to think about, if we're going to grow with the dogs, we're going to go with the children. Why can't we have, because that way, as teachers, we get more one-on-one. Because personally, I'm kind of heartbroken because we've had some kids that don't come to our Sunday school class because they're overwhelmed. There's too many kids.
Sure.
It just overwhelms them, because I'll ask, why aren't you coming? It's like, it's just too overwhelming for me,
Right.
too many. So I just want to put a little input that
Appreciate it.
we can,
Appreciate it.
down the road.
And the advantage that we have, I think, in the way that we have built, especially in this space and in the back space both of those structures are steel, is that the walls are not load-bearing walls. So they can be moved around. And that's part of what we're leaning into, that enabling us to adjust some of those things. I think that's also another one of the advantages that McKnight as an architectural group brings to the table for us, because all they do is ministry structures. So all they do is churches or Christian schools or other ministry structures. So they have done hundreds of projects where they've helped other churches, and they have a really good idea of how space can be used effectively to do children's ministry or youth ministry or other things. So when he will bring drawings, in fact, that was part of what, the things that he was sharing with us, it involved stuff that we would not necessarily have thought through, but he could think through because he's worked on all these other projects. So yes, important questions, and will absolutely be part of the mix of conversation there. Chet has his hand up. Did somebody else have their hand up that I didn't see?
Joe, well, that's.
Joe.
This is not me piling on, but I just want to reinforce what Kathy just said, because there's two elements. It's not just the space in the kids' ministry, because Heather and I are back there every week as well. And I think incoming families, if we want to grow, obviously they have to feel that there's a safe space back there. And when we're bursting at the seams with 20 kids and they're all packed in a space, that is not, if I'm new, I know everybody back there, but if I'm new and I come into some of the situations that we see, like that may not be like, oh, this is a great place where I want my kids to be.
Sure.
And that children's ministry is such a critical point of people not just coming here, but obviously of staying here. And so I'd love to see more space in auditorium, love to see all that, but as much as my time is spent in here, that time back there, I mean, we're approaching points of like, maybe safety points.
Okay.
Just in terms of like the amount of people in the room, the amount of adults that we have in that space. When we've got, X amount of kids because we're doubled up in grade groups, it's not just this is an inconvenient thing, but how are we as teachers and as helpers able to manage a safe space with sometimes children that might have special needs included in the mix or things like that. And so there is a level of concern that I have just in that area as well. So it's not just, this is inconvenient. I wish we didn't have 20 kids and 2s and 3s today, because that's a wild ride. But it's a safety issue at times too.
Yeah.
So that's just to add on.
Thank you. And what's so valuable of what you just shared and what Kathy shared is the majority of us don't see that. The majority of us, like if we come, like in the 9:30 service, we think, oh, we've got some seats in here. If you come to the 11 o'clock service, you think, well, this is pretty tight. But we don't see the tightness in the children's ministry and all of these. I mean, why do we even have this conversation about the potential of expanding? We don't see it necessarily in those other places, but it's occurring, and that's why we really needed to hear that as well. So, yeah, it is a domino effect. It's not just that we can solve this one problem, because if you drop that domino, it knocks another one over and another one over and another one over. So everything that we have to do has to keep all of those things in mind. And it's like, what can we do to improve things? And then if we improve it to this, what are we doing that we're not handcuffing ourselves to do the next thing? So thank you. That was really good information to have. Yes, Joe.
Yes, sir. Would you share your heart about the story you told to us, our committee, about the church in Alabama, of why you want to have one service?
Okay. Yeah. So, most of you know that our oldest daughter, Hillary, and her husband moved to Gulf Shores, Alabama, which you can't get any further south, except for Florida, obviously. But they're 12 hours away. Doggone it. Anyway. They have joined a church, First Baptist Church of Gulf Shores, which is a really solid church, a good church. And when we were there, a couple weeks ago, I was not able to attend there because I was at another church baptizing Jacob Thompson. However, Sarah went to church with Hillary and Roger and the kids, and Olivia was there as well. So it was both girls, all 4 grandkids. Dan wasn't there, but they went. And Hillary and Roger have decided they want to attend the contemporary service in this church. Now, Alabama, as a climate, doesn't have the same restrictions that we have when we're building. They can put a children's wing over there and it doesn't have to be attached to everything else over here because, you know, they can just walk outside and that's not a problem. Here, with snow and everything, you don't want to have to walk outside to go get your kids or go get, you know, it's not going to work. We have to have our buildings connected. But there, the children's wing was over here and the main auditorium was over here. And the contemporary service they were holding in the children's wing. So that's what they attended. And when it was done, Sarah said, I want to go see the rest of this church. So Hillary said, okay. So Hillary and Olivia, they got the kids, all 4 of the grandkids, and they march over to the other structure where the traditional service had taken place. And Sarah said it broke her heart when she walked in. She said it was all older people, and they looked at our grandkids and they said, children, oh, they're so beautiful. She said the older people were so disconnected from the children that they were overjoyed to see that there were children there. And I'm thinking, all right, I understand the concept of having a contemporary service and a traditional service because not everybody likes them. You know, there are songs that we're going to sing that may not be my favorite kind of preference. And there's songs that are not your favorite preference, but when we do a blended thing, we're trying to minister to everybody in the church family in a multi-generational way. I understand the concept of having a traditional service so that you're not offending everybody when they wants to come there, and you have a contemporary service so you're not offending everybody that wants to go there. But the unintended consequence can be just that there's this divide between the generations, and it's a terrible price to pay.
Amen.
So Sarah told me that. You know, our heart breaks a little bit because our grandkids are in the middle of that. We want our grandchildren to be integrated more with older folks. But that's why we do what we do here. We don't always, pull back the curtains and say, this is why we do this is why we do that. But we want our church to be a place that values older people, that values younger people, that it's not about doing the preference thing. It's not about let's design the service because we want that demographic. What we really have here is a unique structure where people love each other and care for each other across the generations, and we minister to each other, and that is an absolute key component. Now, we do that even with 2 services. The services are exactly the same. There's not a contemporary and a traditional. They're a blended service, so young people come to both of them, and clearly more of the young people come to the 11 o'clock because of the way that our life groups are set up. But if at least for a time, we can meet all together, how awesome would that be? So that's part of the thinking between, if we're going to build something, do we just incrementally make more seats and keep 2 services, or do we make it so that we can go to 1 service at least for a period of time, and then if the Lord really grows us, then we have a plan to do the 2 services again, and it doesn't make us have to rethink everything from the ground zero. So, all right. So, yeah, sometimes you get a little glimpse of things, and that particular story really impacted Sarah and me as we talked through that, about how uniquely sweet our church is in that way. And it's something we don't want to lose. Yeah, no. Oh yeah, gotta wait for the mic.
I was just wondering, the architect, are they part of an architect engineer firm where the engineers will have input on the electrical and HVAC, or are the drawings going to be given to another firm?
So that's a really good question. Do you know the answer to that, Greg?
Yes, it's a design build firm.
So it's a design build firm. And I'm not sure if all of the workers are in-house under the McKnight umbrella, but they build buildings all over the place. And they have those partnerships that if they're not designing it all here, they have a partner that they work with. And so all of that keeps the cost down. And so, yeah,
That's where I was going, because if you have to give it to somebody else.
yeah, so the cost per square foot, as he was describing it, was not bad. I mean, it was actually pretty encouraging. However, it's a lot of square footage too, so, yeah. All right, I see somebody's hand back here. Oh, Billy.
If the thought is that we're gonna maybe double in size, what allocation or thought process is there for, say, a fellowship hall area compared to what we have now? Kind of limited now, it seems like.
Right.
Does this become,
So the answer to that question, there's two answers to that question. It depends on how big the fellowship is. So when we do the service auction, we kind of put round tables in here and we fill this place up. And I think that the capacity at round tables for a fellowship meal program would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 220 people, 200 to 200, and that would be squeezed right in. And that maybe requires doing the food outside these walls. If you have a smaller group, maybe you can fit in the fellowship hall, maybe you can fit in the crew room. However, here's the answer to the question. If this becomes the crew space, then this is the new crew room, which is a whole lot bigger than the old crew room. And what we've asked the architect to do in the sanctuary is to do a flat floor, so that that could be used for a large event. So as we're thinking through the things, how can we reach the community? For example, one of the things that you can do, and you'll see a little taste of this perhaps at Christmas time, because Pastor Rhodes is working on a Christmas program that would be more of a fellowship and an informal thing that we can invite our neighbors to. But if you have an event like that, that's an outreach event, that food is involved or some kind of refreshments are involved, and you want people to sit at tables, having a flat floor in that space that'll hold 1,000 people, that means that you can have at least 500 at tables, we'll say. So that's the answer to that question. So that's kind of in the back of our minds why that would be important to have a flat floor in that building. But depending on the size of the group, there's other places throughout the facility then that could house that. Yeah, but the chairs would be in that space so that it could be used that way. Diane.
Two questions. One, as newbie, I just wanted to confirm, I think in the last business meeting you shared with the previous building projects having been several years ago, are we actually debt-free?
We are debt-free. Let me give you a little quick snapshot, okay? I'm going to give you a quick financial snapshot right now. So, as of yesterday, so not including any of the offerings today, the way that I understand it, our income, our general fund income, so this doesn't include extra gifts to missions and stuff. Our general fund income plus some interest that we're accruing, year to date is $1,066,692. So that's year to date. So today's offering through the end of December will be added to that. To put that in perspective, our budget this year is $1,150,000. So we're 85,000 short of making budget, but yet we've got 2 months plus. And typically, November, December are your better giving months. So we're well above budget in terms of giving. Praise the Lord. That is wonderful. Of the money that we have, assets on hand, we have $1,294,356 of assets on hand. That includes a large chunk of money in a high interest certificate of deposit. Is it still $700,000?
Yes.
So there's $700,000 that we've invested in a CD, and that's returning a really good rate, and so that accounts for some of the interest income that we have. There's $269,000 in a restricted account. I said that we've been paying ourselves a mortgage. We're putting it into a savings account, so it's in a restricted account. That mortgage that we paid ourselves has now accrued to $269,000. We have been doing this refresh of the facility, and we set aside over $200,000 to do it. Earlier in the year, there was still a significant amount of money in that account because we hadn't done the bathrooms, and we've got a bunch of other things happening now. That's wrapping up. There's only $6,500, give or take, left in that account. But that's still restricted there. And we have missions money that has been given. $115,000 is in missions funds. And part of what we want to do a little bit later on is talk about how we can give some of that money away in other missions opportunities that we have. So of all of that, what that means is of that $1,294,000 that we have in assets, there's $900,000, give or take, of unrestricted balance that we have. So earlier I said if we're going to have to do something to change our mission home, we're going to have to tap into that unrestricted account to do that. So, it's great to have that funds available to do that sort of thing so that we can say, all right, these are priorities and we're going to handle those things. But does that answer your question? We are debt-free and we are socking money away as fast as we can do that.
Yes, absolutely. Thank
Great.
you. My other question was talking fellowship hall and with new people coming in. I know we love the fellowship. Are there plans for kitchen?
No. It would be great to do that, but no. So we redid the kitchen that we have out there now a little bit 2 or 3 years ago. It's still a warming kitchen. It's not an industrial kitchen. When you do that, then you have to have venting, fire suppression, and this and that, and blah, blah, blah. And then you have, the other thing that you have with that kind of a kitchen is you have to have trained people who are certified by the State Board of Health, and then that says a whole different level of complexity. So we haven't gone through that route, and we didn't tell the architect we wanted that because we're trying to keep the cost down, at least in this phase, but that clearly would be another phase that would be worth doing. All right, I appreciate all these questions. And I'm anticipating that when you see some drawings in a month from now, you're going to have some more questions. But I'm so glad that you asked these ones tonight because we don't have to answer them next month. I'm just kidding. I want you to be able to have some of those drawings in front of you because that will inform some of the other questions that you have. But I do think it's important that we kind of move on, if that's okay. If I have your permission to move on for a couple other things. All right, here we go. I just gave you the financial update, so that was actually on my agenda for number 2, so that's done. Our missions committee has been operating, and they have 3 recommendations to share with us tonight. So let me just start out by saying the storms that we have seen hit our country recently, there's all kinds of disaster relief efforts that are taking place. So one of the strengths of the Southern Baptist Convention is that we have that disaster relief arm that just gets right to it. And so they've already been employed. One of the things that we did in last year's budget was we kind of made one of our missions categories a broader category. We call it our cooperative program missions. And so we get to funnel some money directly. If we have the money there, we can send it to the IMB or to the North American Mission Board or to the disaster relief. So when Helene hit, we sent a check for $5,000 to our state disaster relief. I mean, we could do that because it was already in our ministry budget. So that money has already been spent. But that's $5,000. That was helpful, but it's a drop in the bucket, right? So what the missions committee is asking for in recommendation 1 is that we provide a one-time gift to Samaritan's Purse to support specifically the Helene storm efforts. Now, here's the thinking behind that. Helene, for the most part, has hit the mountains, right? I mean, the really hugely affected area is around North Carolina in that area. Samaritan's Purse is based squarely right there. And Franklin Graham has mobilized Samaritan's Purse. They're doing a disaster relief effort on the ground there because they have all of those relationships. And so what they're doing is really the front line, even more so right now than the Southern Baptist disaster relief. So it's not like we want to rob from them, it's just we want to help all of the good partner ministries that we can. So the first recommendation is that $5,000 would go to the Samaritan's Purse for Helene. And that's going to come out of that $115,000 that's already designated as missions money that we can use in that sort of way. So this is not like we have to raise additional funds. It's already there. We'll just be spending it. So that's recommendation number 1. I'll have you vote on that in a minute. Recommendation number 2 is that we give them an additional $5,000 to help with the Milton storm relief. Because, 1, 2, boom, boom, one right after the other. So again, both of that, the total will be $10,000. Will come out of that $100,000 balance. The balance is actually 115, so bring it down to about 105. And those 2 recommendations have to do with those storm disaster relief. So this is coming from the missions committee, so it's been moved and seconded out of the committee, but do you have any questions or comments? Nat? Greg does not need a membership at a gym. We just need to keep him busy.
This might come across really weird, but for those on the missions committee, what is the purpose of the $105,000 sitting in the account instead of going to missions? And is this an opportunity where, obviously, we don't want to spend it dry because there may be a sudden missions need that we would want to cover, but it seems like that's a really high balance for money that could be working somewhere.
It is the highest balance in that account that we've ever had. And so the missions committee, they've got a 3rd recommendation coming for another $10,000. But they're trying to say, yes, let's do this wisely. So right now, as they're looking at the next calendar year, there's at least 2 missions trips that they're planning. That part of that account is so that we can support our member missionaries who may not be under a Southern Baptist agency, but they're with AA or something else. So we want to support them. We also want to have funds that we can funnel into other community ministries and other things as well. And we want to have funds for our church family when they go on like a medical missions trip. So knowing that those trips are being planned and that costs are going to rise for some of those, they are hanging on to some of it, but that's a much higher balance than we've ever had before. And so it's not like they're just trying to throw it willy-nilly, but this is an opportunity. When opportunities present themselves, they will be bringing this kind of thing to us. And so there might be some more that they'll bring to us in the November meeting or the December meeting, or we might just have to, call a special business meeting, whatever those options are. That's what we set that account up to do. If we don't spend it, it's still restricted in that account. I mean, we could vote to say, that's more than we need, let's, release $50,000 or something else. We could do that. But because we've given it with that purpose in mind, because missions are so important to us, we want to say, okay, Lord, how can we use this well? All right, yeah, Duncan.
Yeah, along those same lines, and maybe this is just my ignorance, I don't know how much $5,000 does. I mean, it still seems like a drop in the bucket compared to what the devastation was. Do we think we should do more, double it, triple it? I don't know.
It's a good question. And I know that the missions committee has talked about that. So I wasn't privy to their meeting, so I wasn't there, but it is one of those fine lines. How much do we give? What would be appropriate? If we start here and we decide that's not enough, we can, we've got 2 more business meetings next month and another one in December that we're going to be doing. So we could address that in the future. And we wouldn't have to amend something and go through Robert's Rules of Order, which, if you don't mind me saying so, I would like to avoid at all costs, because amended resolutions and recommendations are just a nightmare for the moderator. However, we can tell the missions committee, we're okay with this. Think about being a little bit more generous even. Yeah, Mike.
I guess with almost meeting our budget with the amount of money that we have, I don't know, I've just seen that devastation in those poor folks. And God has richly blessed our church. And why couldn't it come out of more of a general fund than having to come out of the missions? Because everything you said is dear to my heart, that we don't spend it out of missions, because all those things you just said. But my heavens, God sure has blessed us in the general fund, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. So, I know that not everybody reads the bulletin. He says with a giggle, because it's always the point of contention with Morgan, who does the bulletin. She actually has a little coffee cup in her office that says, "It's been in the bulletin," is what it says. But in the bulletin, in the back of the bulletin for the last several weeks, I have put in a way for people to make individual contributions to the disaster relief efforts through the Southern Baptist Convention and through our state convention. So I do know that that's on a lot of your hearts. And we want to release you to do that for sure, but we also want, as a church, to do that. So I think, well, Pastor Tim, who is the shepherding over the missions committee, I think you've heard this. Basically, there's a desire maybe we could do some more. So, all right, are you ready to vote? We'll take these one at a time. The first one is $5,000 for Helene. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Second one is $5,000 for Milton. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Thank you. It's just so sweet to hear that. Here's the third recommendation. The third recommendation has to do with Pastor Warner in Costa Rica. So last year when we sent our teens down to do that missions trip, they partnered with Pastor Warner at Cornerstone Baptist Church in San Jose, and they did their missions trip together with that youth group. We had hoped to bring some of those youth up here to have them to do a missions trip here. There's been all kinds of logistical issues, and one of the logistical issues is that their church, like ours, has been growing. They're in a rented facility now, and they have the ability, they've been offered a piece of property, which in San Jose is like hen's teeth, hard to get a hold of. But they have to raise, I think it's $300,000 by the end of the year in order to get this so that they can then move and start to build in that and continue on with that project. Now, Costa Rica, one of the things that in our partnership we've discovered is that there's not a lot of funds by the Christians in Costa Rica. So Pastor Warner actually came to the States to talk to a couple of the churches that have partnered with him. And came and talked with Pastor Tim and I. We then presented what he presented to us to the missions committee, and their third recommendation is to provide a one-time gift of $10,000 to that church, Cornerstone Church in Costa Rica, led by Pastor Warner, to enable them to purchase this property and build a new building. And so that's part of the additional things. If we've got money available and we see a need, and we know from firsthand experience, how do I want to put this? How would you describe Pastor Warner and his church?
Very evangelistic, growing, flourishing, and they're going into a neighborhood where they're the only church in the neighborhood, and they have a tremendous opportunity to evangelize that neighborhood. And that neighborhood, that new church location, is close enough to their current place where they're renting, where they'll be able to have everybody just move over there. And so it's a tremendous opportunity, tremendous lesson for us to partner with a fellow church, and God's been gracious to them. They've grown from meeting in a garage to meeting in this storefront facility, and God's moving in a mighty way.
Right, and Warner sends us his monthly newsletter. And there's not a month that goes by that he doesn't describe the efforts of the church family in terms of evangelism. And it's a little throwback, because I remember when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, we would kind of like, well, how many tracts did you give out this week? You know, how many conversations did you have this week? We'd kind of record that sort of thing. Handing out tracts and maybe knocking on doors doesn't work in America like it used to in the 70s, but it's working in Costa Rica. And so every month when he puts out this report, he's like, yeah, we passed out 2,500 tracts this month. We made these engagements, we did this visitation. That church is growing because they're totally mobilized in that. So when we hear what God is doing, and we've seen it with our own eyes, that is why this is an opportunity for us to partner with them. So that's coming out of the missions committee as well. You're gonna have to run, Nat's over there, and Bruce, are you just cleaning your glasses? Oh, okay. I thought I saw your hand go up. I was just...
This is kind of a two-part question, and I'm a little shaky on my Robert's Rules of Orders, so if I really hope I'm not stepping on people's toes. First half of the question is, do we know how many churches are planning to partner with this church in Costa Rica to help them out?
No. I think probably
They met with numerous churches in Ohio and in the state of Washington, and they had already have half the funds in hand before they came out to us.
Okay. The second part of my question is, if this is allowed, I'd like to move that we amend the motion for $30,000 instead of 10. And I don't want to step on the missions committee toes. If they had those dollars earmarked for somewhere else, I'm happy to discuss this. But I would like to move it. We amend that.
Okay, so here's the moderator's nightmare. If I ever remembered my Robert's Rules of Order, we have an amendment, and the amendment requires a second. All right, so we have husband and wife, first and second. All right, that'll work. Okay, so now the discussion is on the amendment. But now let me just try to answer your question. One of the things that Pastor Tim has been working on is to try to not put all of our eggs in one basket. So we have done a lot with Costa Rica, and there's been a lot of really wonderful ministry results to look at. Like, it was 4 years ago when we voted to give Lamar Sally $30,000 to build the structure behind his house that's a ministry structure in a dormitory. And Joe went down and the Coles went down and we helped with some of that construction. That building is there. And when our teams went down, did you stay in that building? You stayed in that building. So there are teams that are going down to work with Lamar and Joanna all the time, staying there, and they're using it constantly. Well, we have done a lot to partner and come alongside Costa Rica in that way, and so Pastor Warner is another one. But one of the things that's on Tim's heart, and I think it's going to be on a lot of our hearts, is there are a lot of other ministries around the world. So in 2 weeks or something like that, you're going to see about 200 shoe boxes up front, because you've given just a ton of shoe boxes. We're probably next year going to do the same thing, but maybe send some folks from our church to actually help distribute those boxes. All right, well, that's another partnership that we want to go. Pastor Tim is going to be making a survey trip to Uganda in the spring. And right now in our mission home, it's Kevin and Victoria Singerman who serve in Uganda. And Pastor Tim, their daughter Hannah, has been to Uganda through Cedarville, working at an orphanage where they deal with trafficked children. And Cedarville has been working, and Tim's going to go. We've talked with Kevin. So when we end up there, when Tim goes on that trip, he'll be talking about how can we come alongside you, Kevin, and work with refugees, and then make a trip out to this orphanage that they're doing all kinds of stuff. It's not just a residency. They're doing education. They're doing vocational things. It's kind of an amazing thing. So part of what Tim is trying to do is to see on the survey trip, okay, how are all of those things going to play out? Because I think we all know when you see a video of the flood, you're like, man, we just want to throw all the money that we have at that. But if you look at it kind of from that 30,000-foot view, it's like, okay, well, if we throw all the money, then we really can't do anything here until we reaccrue some of that money. But having some of that money in the pot allows you to be more flexible and then come back and say, listen, we're going to take a trip to Uganda. And yes, that trip is going to be 3 times more expensive than it would be to go to Costa Rica. But we're going to have an opportunity to minister at a different level and in a different way there. And so the Philippines is another trip that the youth are working on. And so all of those different things are part of what the missions committee is trying to understand. And And because we've done a significant amount of partnering with Costa Rica, and it's, all right, I will say one more thing. Some of what we've done with Costa Rica has been diminishing. One of the first things that we did in Costa Rica was we did the retreat for pastors' wives. We started that. Now there are several other churches that are doing that ministry, and we're not going to do it anymore, which is fine. And it's potentially moved from doing it in a hotel that we've done it before to moving into that ministry center that we have to build. Well, that's good. If other churches have caught that vision, this is not like we're not being, no, that's our ministry, you can't do that. It's like, God bless you for doing that. And if the Lord had enabled us to do one thing then, but He's going to open another door now, that's okay. And that's a good thing. And so there's that sensitivity to how is the Lord perhaps opening other doors as well. So that doesn't preclude your recommendation, but that kind of gives you context from a little bit higher of a view. So if we vote to get $10,000 here, as well as the $10,000 that we have given to disaster relief, we've knocked it down from 115 to 95. And then, so it's not like 95 is a paltry number, it's a big number.
You mind if I respond?
Yes, please do.
The heart behind my amendment is really that when we sit with a missions balance of $70,000 even, I think deep down, I feel, we've got this covered. If we want to do missions later, we can do missions later. There's no rush to give. The need seems less urgent. But what I know of missions is that the need is urgent. And so I would encourage us broadly, and ultimately this one amendment, it's not going to break my heart if it gets voted down, honestly. That's why we do this, right? But the heart behind it is that we see a need and we do our best with the resources that we have to do what we can, knowing that later on there will be opportunities and knowing that we can give to those too. We're talking about a balance in a missions fund, not the bottom of all of our wallets.
Right.
So that was kind of the heart behind it.
Thank you, Matt. And did you want to say something here, Tim?
The missions committee is also, this coming Friday, meeting with 2 local agencies to pursue developing relationships with them, because you don't need to get on a plane to do missions. We can do missions right here as well. So we're looking at new partnerships as well as advancing the partnerships that we have. So there will be more recommendations for a variety of things next month. So we have a lot coming in the next year or two.
All right, Nancy. Nancy or Judy? Judy, okay.
Judy.
Bruce, that wasn't you this time. I would have to agree with Nate about the 30,000, just upping a little bit with the heart of missions with this congregation, in that when we're building that church-to-church relationship, as it talks about so much in Acts, that I think Dayton Avenue is an Acts church. And I just want to put my 2 cents in there that having folks come up from Costa Rica, up from the country, to visit us and to encourage us and to teach us, just like we are going down there, I would just agree with that.
Yeah. Thank you. Kathy? Now, according to Robert's Rules of Order, we're talking about the amendment right now.
Okay, on the amendment, from what I get from you and Tim, am I wrong to say that you're saying that all these mission things that you have planned, that our fund's gonna go down drastically, or we're gonna still have a decent balance?
They will decline. The balance will decline. Ask me before our next meeting, and I'll have a much better idea of how much. So we want to be mindful of that, but we still have some flexibility, I think.
The way that fund works, by the way, just so you understand how that fund is funded, is we have that in our budget. So a percentage of money goes to cooperative program missions. A percentage of all giving goes toward what's called local DVC, which we can use in a variety of ways with our church family or partnerships that we decide to do. Another little chunk goes to this kind of mission and that kind of mission. So we are funding that based on a percentage of our giving. And because our giving is above budget, that means that our money going into that account is above what we even budgeted, which is part of the reason why we find ourselves with a big healthy balance right now. So yeah, that will continue to accrue. It will accrue at the current giving rates at about $50,000 a year in that one account. I think. I could be wrong. That's off the top of my head. Yes?
We are currently paying $19.61 every month.
1961 is going into that every month. So no, not $50,000, but less than that.
Just for that one.
Just for that one account. Okay. So yeah, so do the math on that. It's $23,000. And depending then on how much the giving increases that would be what the budget would say. But as the giving increases, we can do more of that. Okay. All right, are you ready to vote on the amendment? All right, here we go. I'm going to have you raise your hands for this one. All in favor of the amendment, which would be to give $30,000 to Pastor Warner in Cornerstone Baptist Church for this project. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay. Opposed, same sign. Ooh, he would do this to me. Because I don't know what that vote was. I mean, I looked at your hands, I was hoping it would be a no-brainer. That was not a no-brainer. And I forgot to say one more thing. And here, let me just add this. There was $9,200 that was given outside of the budget and earmarked for Costa Rica. That's sitting in a restricted account that we can't use for anything else. So the first $9,200 of that recommendation is actually not coming out of the local DVC, it's coming out of there. I'm sorry, I should have told you that before. It's in my notes, I just forgot to say it. So in other words, what that does is instead of taking the $10,000 out of that big account, it spends the money that's already been given, which by the way, that money has been given for the other Costa Rica things that we have done. The people just gave over and above what was actually needed. But because it was given for that, we put it in that account and said Costa Rica. So $9,200 is already, we're supposed to spend it on Costa Rica. I'm about to ask you to do this again, and I'm going to have to count. So Greg, can you count? And Bill, you've got... No, it's not. It's in addition to the 115.
Is it part of the 30,000 we're talking about?
It would be part of the 30,000. So that 9,200, if we gave 32, we'd actually be giving 92 from the money that's already been given to Costa Rica, and the other 2,100 or whatever, 21,000 would come out of the local DVC account, which is the 115, now 105.
Okay, without this amendment, then we would be giving what we've already decided to give.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty much, yeah. All right, you ready to vote?
Have we reopened the discussion?
Well, we almost have. Yeah, do you have a question then?
Well, it seems like we're not aware of everything the missions committee is doing, and that's the purpose of the mission committee. Why don't we send a message back to the mission committee and let them come back with a adjusted amount if they feel it's necessary. It's not, I know for me, I'm not opposed to giving more, but I don't know. I don't have the information to make that decision at this point.
Okay. And thank you for saying that. That's basically what we've kind of decided about the disaster relief. We can give more, but let's put it back to their committee to hear that. All right, so with all of that, we still have the amendment on the floor. We need to vote, and we need to count hands this time. All right, so all in favor of the amendment, which is $30,000 total from the multiple accounts, please raise your hand right now.
Raise them high.
Okay, ready? All opposed to that, please raise your hand. It's defeated. Yeah, all right, I got the same number as you did. So here's what we're going to do. What that means is the amendment did not pass, but we've heard it. So the committee has heard that. The original recommendation for the $10,000 is now what we'll vote on. Okay, you ready? I think we can do this one. All in favor of that tonight? $10,000, please raise your hand. All right, don't have to count that one. That's good. Thank you very much. Okay, so the missions committee will go back to the drawing board, and we do have a couple more business meetings that we'll cover. Just a few more items of business tonight. One is that we've been baptizing a number of people recently, and when we've baptized them, we haven't done what we normally do, which is bring them into membership on the basis of their baptism. So I would like to bring into membership tonight the folks that we have recently baptized. So here's the list of people just recently baptized: Abigail Heiser, Hannah Benton, Chuck Gobble, Colton Mabe, Hayden Mabe, Joshua Mabe, Hannah Jenkins, Esther Walker, and Caroline Smith. All of these were baptized, given their testimonies, and I think we ought to just bring them into the church membership now. So that's kind of what we need to do. I would entertain a motion that we do that officially. Thank you. All in favor say amen. Amen. All right, thank you. That's almost the last thing. I got one more thing to share with you, and this is just an informational item. We have a church van. Our church van is a 2008 that has recently, or not so recently, maybe about a year ago, been squatted by mice. So we've got squatters in our van, and it's been difficult to get them out. In addition to the fact that it is a 2008 and it needs to be replaced. So last year in the missions budget, or in the ministry budget, we earmarked $20,000. So $20,000 of our budget this year is going to replace that. And we are seeing that the end of the road is coming on that dear old red Clifford bus, minivan, and we are in process of researching how to replace it. So what we would like to do is we would like to replace it with a van that our senior adults can also use. It's difficult for our senior adults to squat down and go through all of the different rows to get to the back seat, because to get 15 passengers in it, that's what you have to do. And you have to like tie rubber bands around your pant legs so that the squatters don't go flying up your pant legs. But we want to try to get them something that they can use, as well as all the other groups in our church. What we're looking at, and the research that's happening, is we're looking at pretty much at all the possibilities. New versus used, purchase versus leased, van versus a 15-passenger minibus. A minibus would be kind of like you've seen them, I think the Xenia Cats. So you can walk into it and walk all the way to the back row, and there's an aisle down the middle and so on. So we're looking at all of those things. We don't have a recommendation or a motion yet because more data is necessary. We've got $20,000 that we've been tucking away in this year's budget that can go toward that. But the cost of a new van or a new minibus or even a really good shape used vehicle is going to cost a significant amount of money. And so that will be forthcoming. Just want you to be prepared for that. But we think that that's a really good use of funds, especially since so many groups in our church are using it, and our seniors are becoming more and more active. So that is a really good thing, really good thing. Duncan, did you have your hand up? Get a cat? Get a cat? Yeah. We haven't discussed that actually, but that might not be a bad idea. So I know many of you have been visiting Bernie and Hazel Baker and bringing them meals, but when Sarah and I went this past week, we parked the car and there's a whole litter of baby kittens there. And Hazel said, "You want to take some home?" "No, thank you." But maybe that's the answer to the mice in the van. Yes?
The decision on the type of vehicle we select make a difference on who's allowed to drive it?
Yeah, no, so what we don't want to do is we don't want to exceed the 15 passenger limit. There's a couple reasons for that. One is if you have a vehicle that has more than 15, including the driver has to have a CDL with a passenger endorsement. And so it's not easy for our teams when they need to use that vehicle, like, okay, are you available? Because it really limits what you can do. The other restriction has to do with insurance, and so you want to get a vehicle that the insurance isn't going to, really tie your hands and make it very difficult for you. So with those constraints in mind, it's a 15 passenger that we're looking at. So technically, the van that we have now is 15 passengers. Technically.
Will they take the van and the mice as a trade-in?
Will they take the van and mice as a trade-in? Who knows? And now it's time to adjourn. Are you okay with that? Do I have a motion to that effect? All right, very good. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes are both. Let me pray. Lord, thank you for an opportunity to discuss these many things. And Lord, I thank you for the heart of our church family to be generous. Lord, I've known that to be true over these years, that you've allowed me to be a partner with this wonderful church family. And I've seen that generosity at every single turn. And again, tonight, thank you for that. Lord, help us never lose that. Help us to always be able to see the resources that you give us as a stewardship that we have the privilege of using to do your work here and around the world. So, Lord, thank you for that. I pray for the missions committee. They've been kind of tasked to go back to the drawing board maybe and to be even more recommendations in terms of using those funds. And I pray, Lord, for the ministries that we've talked about tonight. For Samaritan's Purse, for this Southern Baptist Disaster Relief, for Pastor Warner and Cornerstone Baptist Church down there, and the other things that we've talked about in Uganda and the Philippines and around the world and here in our local community. I thank you, Lord, for all of the efforts and the work that's being done to share the gospel and to meet needs of people. And I pray that you would use the gifts that we're able to give and the ways that we're able to serve around the world for your honor and glory. As we leave this place tonight, please keep us safe this week. Help us to live in a way that brings you honor and glory. And I pray that you would be pleased to enable us, Lord, to point others to you. That you would give us opportunities this week to have conversations with people, that you would open those doors for us. And Lord, give us the right words to say to help them to know that you are there and that you have made it possible for us to be saved and redeemed. And thank you for all that you've done for us and for all that you are. And I pray these things in Jesus' strong name. Amen. God bless you. Thank you again for coming tonight. Next business meeting, November 10th.